Good evening and welcome to Blue Mondays. Blue Mondays is where we take a look at national, state, and local news through a progressive perspective. On this week's show, we are joined in the studio by Dr. Richard Suddith, and he will be interviewed by Dr. Barbara Connor. They're going to sit down and they're going to have an in-depth conversation about a recent report that was released by the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and it's in with regard to Iraq. There are some really important informations and bits and pieces that I think that you'll want to pay close attention to, because the traditional media has not picked up on it whatsoever, and I think you'll want to take a listen to this. Then, after that segment, we are going to go into an episode of the Freedom Files, and this week, the Freedom Files we will focus on is Youth Speak. But first, as always, this week in the news. Detainees cannot challenge their status. Here's an explanation of the new law, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. But here's the new explanation by Jack Cafferty of CNN.
Thank you, Wolf. A new legal battle is brewing over the rights of detainees, this time within our borders. The Bush administration said yesterday any immigrant arrested on suspicion of terrorism on U.S. soil may be held indefinitely and may not challenge their imprisonment in court. This all goes back to the case of Ali Saleh Kala Al-Mari of Qatar. He was arrested in 2001. He was a student here in the United States at that time. He has now been labeled an enemy combatant, a new designation signed into law last month. Aliens who are in custody normally have the right to contest their imprisonment. Enemy combatants do not. The law was set up to be used mostly in the cases of the detainees at Gitmo, but Al-Mari is the first detainee inside the United States to be held under it. In a separate court filing yesterday, the Justice Department defended this new law as constitutional. The question then is this: is it fair for immigrants in the U.S. to be held indefinitely if suspected of terrorism? Email your thoughts to CaffertyFile@CNN.com or go to CNN.com/CaffertyFile. Wolf.
Jack, thank you for that. And
Nobody out there wants to capture these terrorists more than I do. However, you have to question when one individual, namely the President of the United States, has the sole discretion of being able to say whether you're an enemy combatant or not. That leaves a lot of questions out there. What if you're wrong, Mr. President? What if the person, and no matter what president that is, it could be a Democrat in the future, it could be anybody in the future, but when that one person can make the sole determination without any reprieve or access to the court system, I'm sorry, but I don't think that that's the America that we stand for. We can crack down on this, and we can still give them habeas corpus rights, and I can't believe that this administration is trying to take that away. It seems unbelievable to me. We're going to have more of that in the future. We're going to have some local trial attorneys come in and talk to us about habeas corpus laws and why they need to be retained. So you'll want to stay tuned for that. Up next, Trent Lott is now the number 2 Republican in the Senate. Again. Yeah, that's right. Trent Lott is now back in a leadership position. I know, it's hard to believe for me. Lott, as you may remember, was booted from his leadership position for making these comments.
In ranks. 4 years after his own GOP colleagues forced him out as majority leader, Trent Lott is plotting a comeback, running to become the number 2 Republican in the Senate. In 2002, Lott was pushed aside for comments seen as racially insensitive, praising the late Strom Thurmond, a former segregationist.
When Strom Thurmond ran for president, we voted for him. We're proud of it. And if the rest of the country had followed our lead, we wouldn't have had all these problems over all these years either.
Lott's fate was sealed by the president.
It's obvious in this clip that Trent Lott was obviously saying that this country would be better off if it would have selected Strom Thurmond and a segregationist president. These were more than racially insensitive remarks, and that's pretty clear. He stated, "We voted for him, and we are proud of it. And if the rest of the country would have followed our lead, we wouldn't have had all of these problems over the years." What problems is he talking about? Since their main theme was segregation, okay, it's obvious to me that he must be talking about segregation. He would rather have a segregated country. Unbelievable, but yet Republicans in their It's obvious to me that this election hasn't taught them anything when they're going to go ahead and elect him in the Senate to be their number 2 spokesperson and the number 2 leader there. Unbelievable. This week, we have a clip of the week. We're going to start a new program where we're going to feature one clip every single week. This week's clip of the week is actually from MSNBC's The Countdown with Keith Olbermann. And interestingly enough, it's a series of clips from late night television. So take a look at the work that MSNBC did putting this together. It's a great clip and a good summary of this past week. Take a look.
Anyone use an electronic voting machine yesterday? Did you come across an electronic voting machine? Well, that was a video game, sir. Was there an Italian plumber on the screen? All right.
Love is a burning thing.
One election. The GOP is now DOA. Oh, my God.
How about that? The race in Virginia is still too close to call. Still too close to call in Virginia. And believe me, this is where the Republicans shine, the crooked recount.
They can feel it. They can feel it. They can taste it. They can smell it. And they're starting to drink it. What is victory urine?
Wait a minute. And this is Arnold Schwarzenegger and his staff celebrating his re-election to governor of the Golden State. Let's go live now via satellite to Sacramento. There they are.
Let's begin with the other big news out of Washington. 23 years ago, 2 men shook hands. No one then could have guessed how closely their fates would be intertwined. Or that this week would be kind of a crappy week for both of them.
Donald Rumsfeld announced he is stepping down. Yeah, Rumsfeld said, I made the decision after it became clear that I couldn't do my job effectively, and then I waited 3 years.
Our show tonight, Donald Rumsfeld.
Secretary.
This is from Edward Coleman, Elko, Nevada. Is there anything you won't miss about the job? Anything you won't miss, Secretary?
I'd have to say dodging Cheney's bullets in the cabinet meetings. You just got owned, Dickie C.
Yeah, he just...
So let's take a look back at some of the highlights of Donald Trump.
I think General Myers made similar references to the failings of the insurgency, including support. And yet, this far into the operation,
President Bush had a date today with our next Speaker of the House, Democrat Nancy Pelosi. They went to lunch. Madam Speaker dined on chicken cordon bleu and asparagus spears, while the President enjoyed his usual Lunchables and a big plastic mug of Sunny D.
Mr. President, thank you!
Now, the day before the election, you predicted the GOP would keep a majority in both houses. Did you know majority means over 50%?
No, I didn't know that.
Did you know there are 50 states?
No, I did not.
Now, I heard that before the election you were campaigning in Texas.
Which is different from Vietnam.
Yes, it is.
You're excited today. Is there some sort of noise that you could think of, maybe a vocalization, that would convey your excitement over your victory? And go ahead and make that noise, and I promise I won't replay it. Would it be something like, booyah?
I think, though, President Bush is taking the Republican defeat very hard. There have been rumors that he's drinking again.
Perhaps I need to do a better job of explaining that we're constantly adjusting. And so this fresh perspective of what the American people are today.
It's been a tough 24 hours.
I know, yes, sir. I imagine it would be.
I mean, I thought Brittany really loved Keith Fed.
Yeah.
I really did.
We've seen men for each other.
Those two had something special.
Yeah, something special. Well, sir, no, I'm talking about, of course, the elections.
Oh, yeah, how'd those turn out?
Oh, well, I hate to tell you, it's not good. Yeah, your party has lost control of the House of Representatives and the Senate.
Oh, man. Do we still control Fox News?
Yeah.
And that is your progressive news for November 20th, 2006. And this is Blue Mondays. Blue Mondays is each and every week on Monday night at 9 p.m. on AOC Channel 15. Right here. You'll want to definitely check us out. You'll also want to check over every single Tuesday morning. Check on over to theadvertiser.com and read my column, The Left Blog. That appears every single Tuesday morning on theadvertiser.com. You'll definitely want to take a look at that, where I'll have my thoughts and insights for the week. There you'll be able to check those out. Also, don't forget, you'll want to check out the website, LafayetteDemocrats.org, where we've got a lot of great information, especially over on our blog. A lot of great things happening over there that you'll want to check out. And of course, we want to remind you that Democracy Now! Plays every single day, Monday through Friday, on AOC Channel 16 at 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. You'll definitely want to take a look at that. And with that, we'll be right back.
I think people increasingly, again, see parties pretty much owned and controlled by the same interests, and they don't see the politics that's connecting to them. And I think we've got to do that. I believe in public life.
Our cause is now gaining resonance around the country, if not the world, because more and more people are coming to see that the misrepresentations of the sorriest presidential administration in my time is now crumbling before us.
You know, so we have to call our leadership and our elected officials to represent true democratic values, and that's why I joined the Progressive Democrats of America.
I think that's the fundamental question for 2006 and 2008. Do we continue to concede at the erosion of government as we see it today, or do we see a retrenchment beginning at the local level, at the state level, to the federal level, of candidates that run under the belief that we can make a difference and make government work again to make our lives, our daily lives, better?
PDA means two things. It obviously means Progressive Democrats of America. It now means people demand accountability. We need to work together so that we're not crossing over the same lines over and over again. It is time for change. And so now we've come together, black and white, Latino, Asian, we've come together because people demand accountability.
Long live PDA. Right on, you guys. Keep it going.
It's an exciting time. It's a great time. It's a challenging time to be engaged. And ultimately, it's a rewarding time, because what you'll find in this debate, and when you get engaged in it, that the more you get engaged and the more progressives you find, you'll find some of the best people.
Okay?
You know what you're doing?
I do know what I'm doing. Do you know what you're doing?
We know pretty much most of the time.
And welcome back. First up, we have a News from the Underground interview with Dr. Richard Suddith and Dr. Barbara Connor. They're going to sit down and talk about the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and their findings on the build-up to the Iraq War and actually what has transpired. I think you're going to find some incredible tidbits of facts that are in here that the mainstream media has not caught on to yet. I think that it's incredible. And of course, it's on a News from the Underground segment. So we have to thank the folks there for putting this together. So take a look at this interview.
Hello and welcome to News from the Underground. We have a very important and special segment right now, as we are going to be talking with Dr. Richard Suddith. Mm-hmm. And you are going to tell us some about a very interesting report All right. So, Mr. Suddith, you live here in Lafayette,
I do.
right?
I do.
And I think you were telling me you have some businesses here in the
I do.
area. Well, so tell me now what this report is. This is the Senate Select Committee, right?
Senate Select Committee on Intelligence.
On intelligence. And now who would be on this committee, or what kind?
We have, there are 15 members. 8 of those are Republican, and 7 were Democrats.
Right.
And the idea of this particular report, there were several purposes of the report. There was actually a phase 1, which was done in about 2004, which came out shortly after 9/11. But this one was supposed to be the concluding aspect of that particular report. It's called Phase 2, which came out on September 8th, 2006, just a few weeks or so ago. This report is actually has 2 parts to it. The first part talks about the post-war findings about Iraq's WMD and links to Al-Qaeda, and how they compare with pre-war assessments.
Right.
Then the second part of it was the use of the intelligence committee, the community that was provided by the Iraqi National Congress, which helped support the first part.
The Iraqi National Congress.
The Iraqi National Congress. So what I'm going to be talking about is primarily the first report.
The Senate report.
The Senate report on the findings relative to the WMD and the relationship between Iraqi and Al-Qaeda.
All right. And we all know WMD are weapons of mass destruction.
Correct.
We all know that now.
Okay. Right. So now before I do that, I want to at least make one more statement here. The first report actually consists of 3 parts.
Okay.
The first part was talking about weapons of mass destruction, WMD.
Yes.
The second part talks about the relationship between Iraqis and Al-Qaeda.
Yes.
And the third part talks about the Iraqi regime intent, particularly relative to WMD.
Right. So what did they mean to do? What were they planning to do?
What were they planning to do, and what was the intent?
Yes.
It might be interesting, by the way, this report actually is mostly unclassified, but there are parts of it, and I've got a couple of pages here.
Why don't you just show the camera what that looks like?
A couple of pages that are blacked out. Parts of it are blacked out. And those are the classified parts of this particular report.
And you said this report is online.
This report is online, and
it's long. This is you have the whole thing here.
Yes, it's about 148 pages.
All right.
Just the part that I'm going to be talking about. But the other part is even longer. But it really supports the first part.
And so this is a thorough study. It took a few years to put this together.
It did. And it was very interesting. I think if we talk in terms of the...
well, now, so what were some of the points then? I think you said this first report includes a lot of intelligence.
Yes, yes, it does. It talks in terms of particularly the first part of this report.
First part of this report.
For the part of the report we're talking about, talks about WMD, which is the weapons of mass destruction. And there were 3 different types of weapons of mass destruction that were addressed in this report. The first one was nuclear, the second one was chemical, and the third one was biological warfare. And then the question was, how significant was that capability? Now, what actually happened, the overall aspect of this, if we go now to the third part, which actually, now, the first part, which talks about WMD, had 9 conclusions. The second part, which talks about the relationship between Iraq and Al-Qaeda, also had 9 conclusions. The third part, which talks about the Iraqi intent, regime intent, has only 2 conclusions. And I would like to start with the Iraqi regime intent.
All right.
Because what happened there, it was very interesting because there was some concern about whether or not the Iraqis had weapons of mass destruction and whether or not they were trying to build that capability.
Yes.
Well, interestingly enough, what actually happened there was that in 1991, after the first Iraq War,
Yes.
the UN came in and said, thou shalt get rid of your nuclear, chemical, and biological agents.
Yes.
All right? Well, that's exactly what Saddam did. He got rid of them. And he did it by the end of 1991.
Mm-hmm.
And so from 1991 until the beginning of the war, he had almost no capability to do the nuclear, chemical, and biological warfare because it was already destroyed. And all he did was to keep a few people around who could actually start that program up if they needed to, but they had no program going. Okay? However, the interesting aspect of this, the second conclusion of the Iraqi intent was that Saddam was very concerned about admitting to the world that he didn't actually have, because he was concerned about Iran.
Sure.
So what he did not want to do is he didn't want to admit that he didn't have them,
Right.
because he was concerned that he would get overrun by Iran.
Sure.
So he deliberately created a certain amount of false indications, so apparently, so that it would appear like he actually had weapons of mass destruction that he really didn't have.
Sounds a lot cheaper to me.
Yes, yeah, that's right. That's right. But unfortunately, the people who were looking for mass destructions were not aware of that.
Right. Now let me emphasize again, this is a final Senate report based on our own U.S. intelligence.
Correct. After the war.
After the war. I mean, up to the current, or September of this year.
Correct.
And so they are finding absolutely no intent, and that the programs were not in place.
They were not viable at the time we went into Iraq.
Well, tell me a little bit about these first two segments about the weapons of mass destruction and all that.
Well, let's actually tackle, if we could, the second one first, the Al Qaeda and the relations between Al Qaeda and Iraq.
You know, I have many people who tell me that they were connected.
Now, the interesting thing is that let's talk a little bit about what Saddam thought about people who were radicals on either the Sunni side or the Shia side.
Right, right.
He had a policy in place in Iraq that said that if you were a radical and you were detected as being a radical of either the Sunni or Shia side, you were arrested, put in jail, and in many instances, they were executed. So he did not tolerate. He was a secular president who didn't tolerate either radicals on the Shia side or the Sunni side.
Right. He had a pretty definite way to handle that,
That's
apparently.
Correct. Right.
Yes. So I know I still hear people saying just, oh, well, there was definitely a connection. But from what you're saying, if we really look at the evidence, that we see that what he really was doing was being very hard on any extreme, including what would be the Al Qaeda.
Right, and he actually did. The Al Qaeda actually did try to contact him on several occasions.
All right.
There are several occasions when he actually did try to contact him, but in every instance, he rebuffed them. He did not want to be associated with Al Qaeda. And in one instance, he had one of his ministers meet with one of the representatives from Al Qaeda in Africa, and they talked about ways in which they could work together. One of the things that Al Qaeda wanted, they wanted an office in Baghdad, and they wanted some additional weapons and some other considerations as well. And then the last thing they wanted was Saddam to allow one of their anti-Saudi ministers, I guess they don't call them ministers, they're, well, anyhow, the type of the Iran, the Islam type of minister. I don't know what they. Ayman, yeah. Well, anyhow, to give his presentations on the radio. And
Al-Qaeda wanted their own kind of religious teacher,
which was anti-Saudi.
Okay.
To actually make a presentation on the radio and allow that to occur in his country.
Right.
That's the only thing he talked about the possibility of actually doing. The other ones he flat turned down.
Okay.
Just flat turned down because he didn't want to be associated with that at all.
And he didn't want him in Baghdad.
And it turns out there is no evidence actually that he ever did allow those radio broadcasts to occur.
Oh.
So that's one issue. There are a couple of other indications that there was a meeting between Al-Qaeda members and Iraq. There's two in particular.
Okay.
And they were associated with the hijackers from 9/11.
Right.
Okay. One of them occurred in Prague, Czechoslovakia.
Yes, that's the one we've heard about.
Well, there's two, but
okay.
There's two, but the one in Prague, the assumption there was that after 9/11, that both of them met sometime in Prague. Okay, this was before. This was before 9/11.
Right, before 9/11. Supposedly they talked.
They met in Prague.
Right. And this was Mohammed Atta, the supposed leader, supposedly.
He was actually one of the hijackers.
Yes.
And then he met with the minister in Czechoslovakia at that particular time. One of the ministers.
One of the Iraqi ministers.
One of the Iraqi ministers who was actually stationed in Czechoslovakia in Prague.
Right.
And the interesting thing, though, Ayani, I think is his name.
Okay.
But in any case, the interesting thing was that the way this came about was that one of the Czechoslovakian intelligence agents noticed the pictures of both of them. Okay, the picture of Mohammed Atta and the picture of this Iraqi person who was actually already knew them in Iraq. The ironic thing was that neither of these were in Prague at the same time.
Oh.
So there's no way they could have had a meeting. And when Al-Ayani talked about this later, he said he didn't even know about this Mohammed Atta until after he saw his picture on the television screen after 9/11.
So you tell me they both happened to visit Prague, but not at the same time.
Not at the same time.
I see.
And so the confusion came because one of the intelligence agents from Czechoslovakia thought he saw both of them and immediately thought that there was a relationship between the two.
Right.
And that they had both ended up in Prague. But what he didn't confirm was that they were there at the same time.
That is a very important point. There's been a lot of confusion about that.
Yes.
I tell you, I think this is probably a good place to take a little break because this is really interesting. We want to come right back to this and continue our discussion, and I hope that you'll join us after this brief break. We'll be back for News from the Underground.
And that was Dr. Richard Suddith and Dr. Barbara Connor. We thank you both for that clip. Next week, we're going to have part 2 of their conversation to give you more information, so you won't want to miss that. That is for sure. And that brings us to the close of yet another show, but you might see that we still have some time left. We're going to bring you in the second half hour of our program, we're going to bring you another episode of the Freedom Files. This week, You Speak. You'll definitely want to stay tuned for that. So after we roll our credits, you'll be able to tune in and stay right here, and you'll be able to see the full episode of Youth Speak. We hope you will stay tuned and tuned into that. We also don't want you to forget to check out the Left blog tomorrow morning on theadvertiser.com, and don't forget to come back here next week, Monday night, 9 p.m. on AOC Channel 15. With that, good night, and take care of each other.